Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The companies for which he has $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Please join the conversation by dialing 332-263-3300. That's 332-263-3300. And now, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Leonard, and welcome my cherished listeners and those that agree with me. I'm especially welcoming, but those that disagree with me, I really appreciate you calling because a debate makes me smarter and helps me to look at things anew and perhaps even change my mind. So anyone that disagrees with me, call me first. Anyway, the subject today is our country's, our nation's defense spending. And my feeling is it's time, long past time, that we should, as a nation, launch a war against the things, the most dangerous things that internally threaten our existence, our lives, our health. It's a never-ending, unceasing foe that we should attack. And so, with the government, Congress recently added $37 billion to a prior agreed upon number of $813 billion. So this year it's going to be $850 billion that we're going to spend on defense. I just want to make it clear that defense encompasses a lot of offense. Some people say, and wisely so, the best defense is a good offense. But we should have a defense offense so we know what we're spending the money on. And it's really incumbent upon us to see where the most real threat is, the most danger to us, our children, our grandchildren, and all of the future. And incidentally, because we spend so much in defense and on armaments, on military equipment and military personnel and backup of all kinds, we have, instead of preventing war, we've been the biggest, the United States has been, sadly, when you think about it. It's been the biggest, most involved in warrior and in world wars, not world wars as defined as World War I, World War II, wars throughout the world. We sadly and inexplicably perhaps we haven't won a war since the United States hasn't won a war since the end of World War II, which occurred in 1945. So we've been in a war with Korea since then, which we did not win, and I never know why we were there. We should adhere to the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe's advocated that we keep our military activity, if it's necessary, in North and South America, close to home. And unfortunately, or unwisely, we're spread out all over the world. We interfere in every country's internal issues, and to continue, we haven't made peace. We haven't had a peace agreement even in the Korean War, which occurred in 1950. We didn't win that war. The next war we were involved in was the Vietnam War, and we didn't win that. We left with our tails between our legs, and we declared victory, but we have not won that war. And I don't think we ever made a peace agreement with North Korea. And the next war we were involved with was the Iraq War. The first Iraq War, we had some legitimate reason to get involved with because it threatened our invaluable commodity, petroleum, our oil, because Saddam Hussein, was it Saddam Hussein, the head of Iraq? Saddam Hussein took over the oil wells, took over the country actually, or attempted to, of Kuwait. So accordingly, and probably rightfully so, we went into that war. We immediately overcame Iraq and returned Kuwait to peace, and it was a war that lasted very short time, and we didn't win it long term because within a very few years we were back fighting Iraq the second time, and again there was no reason. We said that they had weapons of destruction, or what was it called?
Mass destruction.
Mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. That Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and we went into it to eliminate the leadership and take over Iraq, so that they wouldn't have or be able to attack the United States with weapons of mass destruction. Incidentally, it's interesting that in all the years, we're probably the only major country that has not been attacked on its own land and in its own even approaching. We didn't lose ships close offshore. So why we've been involved in so many wars is wrong, and it's inconceivable that we would go to war against Afghanistan. Yes, we lost 3,000 9/11, which was horrendous and which was we shouldn't tolerate that. But there was no need to go to war with Afghanistan, which even Russia couldn't. The last time Russia had a war with them several years before we did, they left without winning. So we had some knowledge and experience that it's not a good place to go in and fight a war. But we had a specific enemy there, and that was what was his name? Saddam, not Saddam. What? Osama bin Laden. Yeah, Osama bin Laden. And we should have gone after him because he was the culprit, and we should have, as we did ultimately, wipe him off the face of the earth. We did. We found him in Pakistan, and we destroyed him that day. So, but it shows you that building up military equipment only gets you involved in more wars. It doesn't prevent wars. We've been, if we didn't have so much military equipment and so much invested, we wouldn't have the ability to do it even if we wanted to. But since we have it, we've become the world's policeman, and there's no reason for that. We entered the Serbian Serbia. Who was their enemy that time? Serbia, and anyway, we helped them settle what was a civil war between Serbia and its adjacent, formerly part of the country. Names skip my mind these days. One day you'll realize that when you get to be my age, which I hopefully pray and hope that you do. You should only be so lucky, in good health. So what's the reason for all this expenditure? It's a major part of our budget. It's more than half of the country's discretionary spending, which includes health and all the things we spend to improve our lives, our infrastructure. It's just, there's no reason for it. There's no common sense. There's no, but I guess you can attribute it to, and wisely, at the time I didn't think Eisenhower was such a great president because hardly anything happened during his regime, during his 8 years. But you don't get to be a major hero, a heroic president, if you don't win some war or participate and end some major crash, economic crash or something. So I wasn't overly impressed with Eisenhower. But in thinking about it, now I realize he was one of the greatest presidents we ever had, because he kept out of us. He said, negotiate, don't go to war, use diplomacy. And this was from somebody who was a key factor in helping us win World War II. He was amazing in the wisdom that on the day he left, after 8 years, he warned the country, don't be careful of the military-industrial complex, because it's become so powerful. It gives out so much business and income to every state in the Union, and it has a great motto. It's for defense, so no congressman or senator could ever vote against defense. I mean, defense is something you're doing to protect yourself, right? So he warned us, be careful, because the military, which is always eager to expand their capacity, and the more they're involved in growing their forces and their military equipment, the more promotions there are, the more excited they are about their careers. The generals particularly, who incidentally, in the history of mankind, always were the ones that stayed behind and sent young people to go to the front and be the ones that are killed. Some sociologists argue that it was one way for them to have all the young women available to them, because they were getting rid of so many of their young men that there was a shortage of men available to those left behind. So, or those that survived. So I don't know. I don't buy into that, but it is true that the generals stay behind and make the plans, and then they, like in Normandy, we lost. That was Normandy Beach, in our best confrontation with the enemy in Second World War I. We lost innumerable of our forces, innumerable, and killed and crippled and maimed. Incidentally, the cost of war is only measured in the people we lose during the fighting and during the period we're at the war, and what we lost in Afghanistan because 3,000 people were killed. Supposedly, that was what we against the enemy that created the death of 3,000 people, we lost tens of thousands of our military, of our young men and women, not to mention all the civilians that were killed, innocent civilians that are killed in a war. And what was I thinking? And this, our most valuable asset we lose in these wars, the blood and treasure that we lost in the Afghanistan war, over $1 trillion. Certainly over $1 trillion between the two wars we were fighting simultaneously, the war against Iraq and Afghanistan pretty much at the same time. And my book, incidentally, although he's criticized Biden for the way he left Afghanistan, and rightfully so in terms of what the generals prepared looked at as a way to get out. We lost about, I think, some 20 of our soldiers and people at the front, and maybe $75 billion worth of equipment. But we got out, and we finally ended that massacre of our own troops and of the people there, and brought the war to an end. Whereas all the way back to when was the war started? During Obama? No, I think Bush, George W. Bush, the son, the President Bush, initiated the war against Iraq, and then because of 9/11, he initiated the war against Afghanistan. At one point, he declared victory. He was on a battleship, I believe, and he said, "We won the war." He was just, so pleased and so excited, and we were there for another 20 years, or almost 20 years. And then Obama didn't get us out, said he was going to get us out of the Afghan and Iraq and the war. And Trump said he would get us out, but we didn't have many troops there, many forces there, but we still had people we were losing, and certainly much of the nation's treasure was being lost there for years during Trump's administration as well. So the fact that he got up and got us out, thank God, we're no longer involved with Afghanistan. And we should get out of all of these other places. We don't belong there. We're not the policemen of the world. And so what should we do with that $8.5 billion? $37 billion I mentioned was recently added. It's enough to take care of so many of our nation's needs. Just that $37 billion could provide food and vital needs for all those in poverty. That's a lot of money. So they added that. And of course, every Congress in every state is in favor of that, because every state in the United States has military contracts. So the warning that Eisenhower gave as he left, and nobody knew better. Most of the generals that retire or the presidents retire discuss what they've achieved or what like General MacArthur talked about his military career and his achievements. But here, Eisenhower, who was most familiar with wars and military equipment and expenditures, was the one who warned us, be careful of the military industrial complex, because the industry loves it. It's the most profitable business. As many of you know, we paid I think it was $11,000 for a toilet on an airplane. It's considered by many the most wasteful and corrupt spending. So, but it continues because it's so profitable for so many, including states and companies and contractors and subcontractors. And it's something that the Congress says, we increased our defense, we're stronger with this. It sounds so impressive. But when did we actually use all that equipment, all that military stuff that we expend trillions on since the Second World War? At one point, we thought if we end the Cold War, we'll get the dividend, and that we'll be spending less on military equipment and personnel, and we could use it to rebuild our infrastructure. Every day we're on the roads, we lose a good part of our lives driving and waiting in traffic and enormous costs of delivering goods and services, buses and trucks that bring everything to, even the ones that are brought by plane are ultimately delivered to the end destination by truck drivers. And medical, we could, for what we spend on military every year, we could pay off we could have Medicare for Medicaid, medical coverage for every person in the United States, pay for everyone's drugs, prescriptions. We could spend the money necessary that we say is not available for the build better. Well, what's the total BBB? Build back better, which had many wonderful things that we should have, but Congress said we don't, and most of the people that were against it said we don't have the funds to do that, but we have the funds to blow on military equipment that's never going to be used or is only going to use where we get unnecessarily involved. So it's time we stopped that and launched a war against the things that are going to kill every congressman, every senator, every president's family and children, every U.S. president's family and children, every one of you and I, and every one of us, you and I and our children and grandchildren. And that is attack the things that dangerously threaten our lives internally forever. They've been and they will be. And that is cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. I could go on and on. The things that are so heinous, so horrendous, that human beings go through. The pandemic recently in the United States killed over 1 million people. Over 1 million people. I don't think we lost that many in the last 4 wars combined, 5 wars combined. So it's outrageous that we have no money to take care of the needs of the people, or to spend money to deal with global warming. That's really a threat to our environment, to our further existence on this earth, according to many of the esteemed, recognized scientists. The best world-class scientists tell us that if we don't address that issue even promptly, certainly within the next 10 years, there's a real threat to our survival. Anyway, I'm trying to think I still can't get it. Why are we doing that? Why isn't it why why is it more important for me to save my children than a congressman to send? Excuse me, my producer is giving me some signal. So let me see what they're saying. I guess you can all hear me. Oh, look into the camera. Okay. I thought you're tired of looking at my face, so I didn't look into the camera. Anyway, there's some interesting statistics. It's interesting that the Pentagon, the military establishment, is assumes more of our fossil fuel, the fossil fuel consumption over the last two decades of the U.S. military is still the world's top petroleum consumer and largest carbon polluter. So can you believe that? We're funding an operation, we're funding a military that's not only helping overcome the dangers of the climate change and the consequences of global warming. We have more fires in California jeopardizing people, and California is the breadbasket of our concern. We get most of our fruits and vegetables and everything we need practically from California, and it's had so many terrible fires unlike anything ever before, and so we've had so many droughts as a result of global warming and floods. Every kind of disaster is exacerbated, is brought on and exacerbated by fossil fuels, and the military is the number one polluter in the world in terms of comparable sources that comparable users or I guess users is the best. Anyway, it's this 8.5 billion, not billion, I can't even say it. 8.5, 850 billion, 850 billion, just short of $1 trillion is spent of our country's gross income, gross budget of our. I think it's the largest part of our single part of our budget, and Eisenhower had it right. He said it would be, if we don't look at it and focus on it and address it, it's going to overcome and destroy much of what we believe in, our democracy and even our survival. He advocated greater efforts at negotiations, greater participation in negotiations. We're involved in a war in a major way in Ukraine right now. We're the major, in effect, sponsor of that war because we're providing equipment, we're lining up NATO nations to involve, and what am I thinking? Oh, yes, and we made almost no effort to negotiate the avoiding that war, which potentially could get us into a third world war and even possibly get us into the use of nuclear weapons. The only time it was ever used before was in Nagasaki and what's the other word?
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima. Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. And the nuclear weapons we have now are 1,000 times more powerful than the ones we used at the atomic bomb we used against Japan. So, what is your idea to eliminate the need for military spending? I suggested mine, and incidentally, to just to say one more thing about our involvement in the war, helping Ukraine against Russia. Russia said before the war, before they even sent the first troops across the border to Ukraine, that they would never attack Ukraine. They would avoid attacking Ukraine if the Ukraine was prevented or never invited and never could join NATO. And they didn't want NATO, which is Poland right on their borders and Hungary right on their borders, 32 nations right now, or 30 nations that are lined up against them, have missiles facing them. How would we feel if we found out that Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran were putting missiles in and even nuclear weapons in across the border in Bermuda and 90 miles away in Cuba and the Bahamas? I mean, we wouldn't tolerate that for 1 minute. And Russia had a right to be fearful. So, and if that was all that it took to stop. Anyway, let me take who's on. I'm sorry to keep you all waiting, but
Hello?
hello.
Hi, this is Dahlia Cat.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. I know you're very involved in biotech. I know you're against all this defense spending. How come the government doesn't spend more on cancer and on, curing degenerative diseases? Everybody knows that those are really the most important things. People are dying every day, as you say, and you say when when the United States does put its mind to, cure something, when they wanted to send a missile, and beat Russia, they did that. When they wanted to spend the money and cure AIDS, they did that. How come they don't bother to deal with things like curing cancer? Why isn't tons of money going into that?
That's a great question, a really great question, because it pinpoints something that you all know is true. To cure cancer, to fight cancer on behalf of all of us, we have to have a fundraisers for cancer and marches for cancer and wearing all kind of ribbons. Instead of the government providing that money, if we provided the money for that kind of not only cancer but heart disease, all the things that I mentioned earlier, Parkinson's, what kills everybody, Alzheimer's, diabetes, all of the things that not only kill us but hurt us and make our lives miserable. And for that we have to, the government does some, the NIH does some, but nowhere near what it's a fraction of what we spend on the military. So that's an excellent point. and if the public realizes that and would agitate for more to be spent, look, we couldn't even get coverage for all the kids, medical coverage for every child in the United States, much less every citizen. So it's a hard thing to get Congress to move on something which is not nearly as profitable and rewarding to industry as is military spending.
But wouldn't people vote for somebody who advocated for that?
So far, it doesn't seem like that because when it wants to spend more money on what I call good things like food and essentials for those at the lowest end of the society, the poorest people that are sending their kids to school hungry and are undernourished, we lose a potentially valuable part of our resources through wars. And wars, it's interesting. In wars, we make a hero. Our heroes are the ones that kill the most. Young people we send them off to kill each other. That's the goal. And if you kill the most, you get all kind of medals. And here we want to spend money on things that will save lives. I think it's somewhat like we care more about profit than school children, because the gun industry has never made as much money as it currently makes. The most profitable item that they sell are AR-15s, which are assault weapons that are meant to use in war, in the military, not the civilians to use at home. And it doesn't save any lives. Nobody ever saved a life by having, to my knowledge, by a criminal coming in the house and they're using an assault weapon. An assault weapon shoots about 100 bullets in 2 minutes, I think. And not only bullets, but guns shoot bullets that go right through you. These they buy a magazine which contains maybe 1,000 bullets, 500 bullets. We call them bullets, but they're really sort of miniature bombs that are contained in what the size of a bullet. But when they hit the bottom, they explode. So much so that some of the school children that were killed in Uvalde in Texas were so blown apart that they couldn't identify the bodies. They had to do DNA what is it? DNA
analysis.
Testing in order
tests. DNA
to identify.
Tests, analysis to identify them. I mean, here is really what it's all about. Profits before lives, before and when I say how many soldiers are killed, it doesn't, for the next 70 years, 65 years, we'll be paying VA hospitals and VA veterans to be treated by doctors and all kind of psychological traumas that they went through have to be treated for the next 65 years. We haven't even thought about that cost. We talk about the immediate costs that we spend this year during the battles, during the actual war, but the ongoing cost is enormous. Anyway, that was a great question, and it got us to focus on something that's critical. I don't understand. Every congressman, they get cancer. Don't they realize that if they took the same approach to cancer, like that they took to the spot, beating the Russians to getting a satellite to outer space to landing on the moon, which we did, even though we started off way behind, because we were neurotically, compulsively driven, and we spent whatever it took. We funded every company that could be helpful, every university, every research department, and we finally beat the Russians to that because it was important to us. In the same way, we probably could, if we had a crash program, a mission, a crusade to replace fossil fuels by alternative energy, by all getting everybody to buy electric cars, by giving them subsidies. If you buy another electric car, maybe you should get $10,000 or $15,000 towards the purchase. That's the fight we should launch. The things that are good for people. It's like we don't have people. We only have robots going to war. As a matter of fact,
But there's no one with good priorities who can make these speeches.
Well, I haven't heard
present something to people.
I haven't heard any, even one congressman or one senator ever suggest this. I don't know if they think it would be self-serving, which it would be. It would serve their own health, their wives' health, their children's health, everybody, and it would be a permanent help instead of wars, which. The reason we have so many wars, that we're involved in so many wars, is precisely because we spend so much on the military, and they're always getting ready for wars. And no other nation that I know of has been involved in as many wars, big wars, as the United States. None, even though we've never been physically attacked on this land of ours. So it just doesn't make sense, but I can't understand it. If anybody out there has an understanding of why we prioritize military spending over the defense against the things that are going to kill us, that's real defense. When I was young, which goes back a long time ago, I think the last time the first one I voted for was... I think it was Abraham Lincoln. Anyway, I go back a long time, but even when I was, really young, at the start of the Second World War, the Defense Department was called the War Department. And after the war, they figured out that was not a good name. So they came up with this euphemism. The nicer way of saying war and getting involved in war, they changed it to the Defense Department. And they don't even have, an offense department. So it's just, our language itself is oh my God, they say I'm running way over time. Okay, I love you all. I hope you enjoyed some of this, and if you have any thoughts about it, you can call me next Wednesday, 6:30. Have a great week. Have a great every day. Bye.